Welcome back, my people, to Flipping the Page with Antonia Carter, where I will be documenting my journey as I go from a simple new writer to a simple published author. This is now part 4 of my very first mini vlog series, From Blank to Book, where I wanted to challenge myself to complete my very first draft ever. I have never completed a first draft in my life, and instead of doing the 50,000 words a month for a NaNoWriMo, this month I really wanted to just focus on completing this one particular task rather than focus on word count. If you would like to hear more about the trials and tribulations that this challenge has put me through, be sure to check out parts 1 through 3 of this little mini series, so that way you guys can catch up on all of the fun that this has been for me. It got pretty dark there for a minute. Now I'm going to be pretty honest with you guys, because here at Flipping the Page, we like to keep things pretty honest. I got my menses this week, and I did not have the strength nor energy to film a little mini vlog. I didn't film myself actually doing any work because I was fighting for my life. So I will not have a little clip of myself working as I talk over it like I have for the previous episodes of this series, but I am still going to sit here and talk to you guys, and we're going to go through my process. And as always, at the very end, we are going to talk about my results and what I've actually accomplished this week. Now, on today's agenda, we will be talking about the power of outlining, more specifically how I went about outlining my particular story and what helped me to go from pantsing for the last 8 years of this story being a thing in my head to actually generating majority of a story in 5 months. Now, I say majority of my story because I will give you a more specific number at the end of the video when we're talking about my results for this week, so you guys will know exactly how much of a story was written in 5 months with the power of outlining, so stay tuned for that. Now let's get into the real entree of this video, shall we? I was a pantser for the better part of 20 years. So I had the idea of becoming a writer at 8 years old after a whole writing assignment, and realizing this is my destiny, this is what I want to do. And if you guys want to hear more about that, check out my author origin story video. But I had the idea to become an author at that age, and between 8 and we'll say 22, 23, I was a hardcore pantser. So I had the wonderful ideas for these books. I had islands of thoughts of scenes that happened, but I could never connect the scenes, and I was just all over the place with no structure whatsoever. So during the pandemic, around the age of 23, 24, that's when I started to morph into a plantser. That was the beginning stages of my planting, because I was learning what outlining actually looks like for authors, or different ways that authors outlined and how they were able to connect one scene to the other. Be sure to check out my 5 writing resources video if you guys want to be more clear on what that looks like for me, or if you want to have an idea of what I utilized at that time to learn what actual outlining looks like. But in the middle of the big greatness that was going on in 2020, I had revisited things, and I was like, if I am going to do this for realsies, then I need to figure out how to make this work and not just have these awesome scenes in my head, but have no way of actually showing you guys how we got there. So what I got from that time was that there is literally millions of ways that people outline. So I did not have to box myself into any particular avenue of ways to go about things. I had a million different ways to choose from that could work for me, and play with it and morph around some things and just customize it to what would actually work for me as an author. So I had a general idea of how my story would go at that time. That's when I had started trying to outline. So I thought through my entire series. I thought beginning to end, how is this story going to open? How is this story going to hit a peak? And how is it going to close? I had just learned what the 3-act structure was, and I applied that to my entire series. Because at the time, I had an idea of what my characters looked like. I had no clue what they wanted in life. I had no clue who they are for realsies outside of the scenes that I saw in my head. But I knew enough to know I could, at the very least, fill out the beginning, middle, and end of the entire series. Not even just one book, but the entire series. Now, again, I was still majority pantser by this point. I did not officially cross the threshold to planting. So I was learning how to structure, but it had not sank in yet at that point to really stick with what I was learning. So I just left things as they were for the following 3 years. I kept trying to work on it, but it was just nothing was sticking. So it wasn't until April of this year when I turned 28. I don't know what it is about 28, but something just hit me and I was like, I need to do this right now. It's now or never. You're either going to be an author or you're not. So that was when I sat myself down, and the first thing that I really looked at was my outline. Now at this point, I'm going to try to explain the analogy the way I see it in my head, so I apologize if it doesn't make sense. But I was thinking of a frog crossing a pond, and at this point, again, I had figured out the large bubbles of things that I wanted to happen. I still had these islands of thoughts that I wanted to happen, but I had no way of connecting them. So by April of this year, I was like, there's this lily pad right here, very close to the shore on this side, and I have this lily pad right here that's very close to the other side. And there's maybe one or two more in the middle to connect these two lily pads. But I'm like, if my frog was trying to get to the other side, it would just fall in the pond and be eaten by the snake that's waiting down there. There's no way to safely connect things right now. Now, at this point in time, the overthinking was definitely trying to take over, because the lily pad all the way at the other side, that's the very end of my series. So I did not need to be thinking super hard about what's going to be happening at that time, because book one over here, this lily pad over here, this needs more of my attention. But the overthinking was like, let's take some steps back and let's figure out the whole thing all together. Let's make it all make sense. And that was a trap that I was falling into at the early stages of this new journey of mine, because I would get lost in details that just didn't matter right now. And what mattered the most was just getting the story out, getting those first set of lily pads established. So at that point, I downsized my view of everything. I knew the general direction that my story was going to go in, but I focused specifically on the first book, and I applied the 3-act structure that I used on the whole series on the first book. So what is the very beginning of the story, what is the middle of the story, and what is the end of the story? And then from there, I think it got easier to break it down further, because I would look at the beginning and middle and then create another middle point between those two. How do you get from the very beginning to a few chapters in to now the climax of the story? So I needed to zero in every single time I would make a new point. So after so many times of just taking 2 points and making a new middle point, until I eventually had enough details in the middle, things were finally starting to make sense. Things were finally starting to connect. I was not just leaping all over the place from one big scene to the other. There were now like foundational steps in the middle to connect everything. And I want to say I finished my outline in August, maybe. I did have to go back a few times and step away from the outline and figure out who my characters were, because I had points where they would have driven the story. So I was like, what they even say right now? What would they even go for? So there were a few times where I wasn't being consistent with that and had to take a step back. But I finished the outline about 3 months ago, but from that point forward, it made it a lot easier to start the actual drafting process. And I would say that's something that I really had to work to be comfortable at, because there were times where I would be hard on myself when I would be in the middle of one process, but I would have to stop and go back to another process of whatever it was with writing the story. But I also learned that a lot of professionals do that all the time. Writing isn't just one streamlined process. For like some people it is, and it's you do point A, then point B, and point C. But for a lot of people, you're working on everything all together all the time. And once I understood that, I think I became a lot more comfortable with taking a step back and working on something else, so long as I was making progress and I wasn't just stepping away from the story completely. Then it was a good day. And another mistake I was making as a pantser for majority of this time was that I was drafting this entire time. I should have been outlining, and I didn't realize that until I actually finished the outline, and I was like, oh, so this is the difference. I'd be sitting there actually writing the story, just letting it pour out of me as it was, without figuring the steps out before, without creating the backbone. I would just throw out some flesh, and I'm like, you need a skeleton to give it some structure. Where is that? You're just throwing out some flesh. So my biggest takeaway from outlining was actually learning what story structures were. learning different ways to tell a story, that made a huge difference for me. So out of all the possibilities, I chose Save the Cat for my story. So the things that I already knew were happening in my story, I could just fit it with the guidelines of Save the Cat. And when I did that, I was like, I have a real story. I'm an author. I'm an authoress. Oh my God, it's clicking. The light bulb has been set off. Now, if you don't know what a story structure is, I am not yet qualified to discuss that here on this channel just yet. I am not a best-selling author or a English major. So definitely Google that if you want to look into different story structures, because that could be the key to helping you with your story if you're struggling with outlining your points. But it's in the title. It just helps you structure your story, and it was a huge game changer for me. So through all of that, where have all of these new little skills come into play? What purpose have they served? How have they helped me thus far? Now let's get into the results of this week's From Blank to Book. So I am going to add a little visual here of my results from last week so you guys can see how much I had to do this week. Now let's get into it. Now, what did I actually accomplish this week? I finished the Hightower Surprise, Dig Deep Down, Execution of New Plan, and Final Image. Now I am going to try to not cry as I talk about this last part, but I actually finished my very first completed first draft. Ooh, I feel like dying. So I've talked about this, you guys, and you know that I am emotional. So I finished it actually 2 days ago, and it was in the wee hours. It was 3 a.m. and I was just working on getting her done, and I didn't even think about hitting the goal that day or anything like that. I was just letting the story flow out, and before I knew it, I hit the final image. Woo! And some of you may be looking at this and you're like, why is she getting so emotional about freaking a story, about writing a book or anything like that? But this has been a long time coming. As I've stated, I wanted to be a writer by the age of 8 years old. That was when it clicked for me that this is what I wanted to do. And things, for one reason or another, things just kept falling through. Again, check out my author origin story if you want to hear about all that. But it was just always something coming in the way between myself and this dream of mine. And especially with the pantsing, I never finished a first draft. I never got that far. And when it clicked in the wee hours of the morning that I just did this, I sat at this desk and I was just crying. I was just bawling my eyes out that I did it. I put my mind to it and something hit. At 28 years old, I said I'm going to do this, and I actually did it, and it feels so good. It feels so good to have seen this through, to take this huge step towards my dreams of being a published author, being a best-selling author. So I did it, guys. I finished it. I finished my first completed first draft. I'm really trying to hold it together for this video because I do not need to be crying all over YouTube, but I've been on cloud 9. I don't even know how to describe this feeling, and I hope that I never lose sight of this feeling ever. I hope that when all of my dreams do come true and when I am a best-selling author, that this feeling never gets old. And I finished maybe my 30th first draft and I'm still sitting there crying my eyes out because it is such a huge wonder and so amazing to honor something that was put on your heart so many years ago. So with that being said and done, I'm taking this next week off. Next week is Thanksgiving here in the States, so I'm going to be hanging out and giving myself a break. That is also some consistent advice that I've seen from many professionals, is that you really need to make sure that you take a step back from your work when you do hit these milestones. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a week off, and then after that week I'm going to start the editing process. And I hope with everything in me, I hope that I am one of those people that is ecstatic about the editing phase, because this drafting phase, it was a long time coming. And I'm not going to say it took 8 years, because I had the dream in 2016 for this book, so it's been a thing for 8 years. I'm not going to say the first draft stage took 8 years. It really took 5 months total. It took 5 months So it wasn't super long when I really sat down and focused on it. But I just hope that this editing phase flies by and I have a fun time with it, because I'm gonna make this happen. I'm gonna publish this book. I'm gonna release this book in 2025, and I'm not gonna let anything hold me back anymore. I'm sorry if you guys hear snoring. That's my dog in the back, my gigantic dog. But I hope that this will fly by. I have it set aside for myself to spend about a month on my first editing phase, and then I'm gonna do a second editing phase, and then I'm gonna do my beta reader stage. I'm definitely the most excited about the beta reader stage because I have a lot of supportive family and friends who are willing to help and see this through. So they have been very eager to read the story and see what I've cooked up. And I'm also actually looking forward to sharing my story with other people. And I think that's been partially due to this YouTube channel. This channel has really forced me to put myself out there, even though it's only been a month. But the fact that I'm sitting here now crying in front of you guys, but I'm sitting here putting myself out there and talking about my creativity, getting more comfortable with stating that I am a writer. I'm not a published author yet. I will be next year, but I am a writer, and it's not something that I hide or put on the back burner anymore. This has helped me to embrace that creativity and sharing a part of me with the masses, which in turn has helped me to be more okay with sharing my book with the masses. And before, I was really dreading the idea of a beta reader stage and giving my book to people close to me and looking for critique, and which I'll make another video down the line talking about the preparations that I've made for that. But I'm actually genuinely looking forward to what everybody has to say and seeing my story through other people's eyes for the first time. So I'm going to work hard through this editing phase so that way I can get to that phase and keep chugging along. I can't believe I'm saying this, but this concludes my From Blank to Book series. I finished the first draft, so this is the end of my series, a week ahead of schedule. So thank you guys so much for coming along this journey with me, and for those of you who have decided to be a part of this community and to watch me blossom into a published author and support. And I love all the commentary and any advice or any points where you may relate to my journey. I just really enjoy the interactions. I think that you guys have also been pushing me to focus on this and finish it out and not let other things distract me, or overthinking or self-doubt or anything like that. So thank you guys so much for being a part of this journey. Join me next week. I don't know what the next video is going to be, but I will continue to post every Saturday. Join me next week as we continue to flip the page, and we're going to find out what that next page looks like next Saturday. And I hope you guys enjoy your holiday season and fill your bellies with wonderful food.